George Zimmerman shot and killed Trayvon Martin. He says it was in self-defense. The prosecution says it was murder. But what will the men and women of the jury decide? We're just 1 week away from the start of jury selection in Sanford, Florida. And tonight on HLN After Dark, we're asking the bold questions. Should George Zimmerman have been arrested earlier? Was he pursuing Trayvon Martin? And who was screaming for help before the gun went off? Vinnie Politan's off tonight, so Ashley Merchant is with our in-studio jury here at HLN headquarters in Atlanta. What do they think happened the night of the shooting? Joining us from Orlando tonight, criminal defense attorney Zara Umansky. She once represented George Zimmerman in another case. Also with us, the man who represented O.J. Simpson and Charlie Sheen. Florida criminal defense attorney Yale Galanter joins us from Miami tonight. And in New York, former member of the Casey Anthony defense team, Linda Kenny Bodden. Plus, we've got our in-studio experts, HLN law enforcement analyst Mike Brooks, attorney and host of the Mo Ivory Show, radio host Mo Ivory, and criminal investigator Charles Middlestat. Tonight, we begin with the case that is the next big trial, the case that could divide a nation, Florida versus George Zimmerman.
He just said he shot him. Yes, the person is dead, laying on the grass.
Just because he's laying on the ground.
Oh, my God.
February 26, 2012, 17-year-old Trayvon Martin shot and killed. Now George Zimmerman, the man accused of pulling the trigger, is heading to trial, charged with murder.
I felt his arm going down to my side, and I grabbed it, and I just grabbed my firearm and I shot him one time.
You watch the case unfold right here on HLN. The grieving parents.
I'm hoping that one day, he's gonna walk through the door, and this is gonna be a nightmare.
The protests. And the arrest.
George Zimmerman is in custody of law enforcement.
Now watch George Zimmerman's murder trial unfold live, right here on HLN. One of the biggest questions in the case against George Zimmerman, should he have been arrested earlier? Ashley Merchant is with our jury.
So, ladies and gentlemen, what do you think? Do you think George Zimmerman should have been arrested at all? Show your paddles.
At all?
Do you think he should have been arrested?
Yeah.
Wow, we have one no. Tell me why.
Well, I'm not quite sure of all the facts, but with the wetness on his back, the extreme duress that is happening during the struggle, I'm not sure that it was actually premeditated. In fact, I'm convinced it wasn't premeditated. It could have been self-defense. It could have been just an accident. I'm not quite sure.
So you're who they want on this jury in the actual trial. How about you, number three?
This is a tough one. It really is, because I am still open-minded enough to listen to both sides. I know that he should have been arrested at some point. I don't believe that night they had enough to arrest him. So, you know.
All right. Well, Ryan, I mean, I think that they think that he should have been arrested for sure. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, at some point, but then the big question is, should he have been arrested maybe the day of the killing or the day after? So I want to go to our panel, one by one. Let's ask you one-word answer. Mike Brooks, I'll start with you. Give one word to describe your delay in arresting George Zimmerman.
Investigation.
Mo Ivory?
Overreaching.
Charles Middlestat?
Predictable, but only in terms of the fact that he was arrested.
One word.
That's a word in a sentence.
One word.
Predictable. He sticks with predictable.
There you go.
Yale Galanter, one word.
Cautious.
Cautious. Zara Umansky, one word.
Smart.
Smart. Smart. Linda Kenny Bodden, one word.
Hoodification. I'm doing Darren Kavanaugh. It turned a hoodie into a hood.
Channeling your inner Darren Kavanaugh. We feel his presence even when he's not here. Hoodification. All right. Ashley Merchant, what do you think? One word.
Efficient.
Efficient. Okay, efficient. Mo's not buying that. We got a lot to talk about on this subject. And folks, it's a complaint a lot of people had. Should he have been arrested earlier, or was the arrest proper when it was done? We'll talk about that in just a second.
Most importantly, I want to know why this guy has not been arrested. First and foremost, a crime was committed. It wasn't an accidental shooting. It was murder. My heart is broken. As a mother, this is the most difficult thing I have ever gone through in my life. And I just don't understand why the police department won't step in and do their job and arrest this guy. Let the judge decide.
Imagine how difficult that must have been for Sabrina Fulton. And George Zimmerman wasn't arrested until over a month later. So the bold question we have tonight, should he have been arrested earlier? Let's take a look at the timeline in all this. Let's start with February 26th. On that day, Zimmerman admits to shooting Trayvon Martin. They have the altercation. He's taken into custody, but he is released. Now, take a look at February 27th. One day after, Tracy Martin identifies Trayvon Martin's body using a picture. And don't forget, police did a walkthrough with George Zimmerman on that day. This is one day after. He has not been arrested at this point. Now we fast forward, February 29th. Sanford police says that George Zimmerman was acting as a neighborhood watch person. He was serving in his role, has not been arrested at this point. Now we fast forward about 2 weeks. Here we go, March 12th. Sanford Police Chief Bill Lee says that no charges were filed. He says there were no grounds to disprove the story of events. And by the way, speaking of Bill Lee, let's take a look at what he had to say on this day.
The evidence and testimony that we have so far does not establish that Mr. Zimmerman did not act in self-defense. We don't have anything to dispute his claim of self-defense.
Now, that's the Sanford Police Chief. Take a look at what happened on March 13th. A guy who works for the Sanford Police Chief, Detective Chris Serino, recommends manslaughter charges. And here are some of the things he said in his report. Zimmerman failed to identify himself as a concerned citizen or neighborhood watch member on 2 occasions. He not only says that, he says Zimmerman's head injuries were marginally consistent with a life-threatening episode as described by him, during which neither a deadly weapon or deadly force was deployed by Trayvon Martin. That's the guy who works for Bill Lee. So after that point, George Zimmerman wasn't arrested, Ashley, for almost 28 days, almost a month. And that has the people asking questions, you know, should he have been arrested earlier? I wonder what your jury has to say about this.
Well, and I want to change the question a little bit for them and say, do you think that George Zimmerman should have been arrested earlier than he was? So raise your panels for that. All right, we've got yes for everyone except for juror number 1. Okay, can I get some comments number 6?
I'm a parent, and as a parent, my child is dead and someone is walking free and not arrested. And I can't help but to wonder if Zimmerman were a black man, would his story have been believed immediately? Right. I think he should have been arrested immediately, and an investigation could have happened after that.
And you had a question. Did you for our panel?
Well, that was my question. My question is really, I wonder if the panel believes that if Zimmerman were black and a white or Caucasian child had been killed, would his story have been believed?
Right.
Would he have been arrested immediately?
It's a good question. We got 2 investigators. We got Mo Ivory here, a lawyer. I want to start with one of the investigators. Charles, what do you think?
I mean, I think it's, it's a very fair question. But all we can do is speculate. I mean, we have to refocus on this, on this incident. And the fact of the matter is that, 2 weeks. First of all, Zimmerman was actually detained and questioned that evening, and so 2 weeks. 2 weeks after the fact, you have the Sanford Police Chief who comes out and says basically, look, there's no ground for any charges whatsoever. And so, that's a reasonable period to be investigating this thing. And, we have to ask ourselves, what evidence has come out since, March 12th that has changed the dynamic here? A special prosecutor's been appointed, and predictably, we had an arrest.
Well, and I also think that night, was there enough probable cause to charge George Zimmerman? Probably not. Most likely there would not have been. Now, I didn't think initially. Initially, I thought, okay, they're moving very, very slow. What have they done? Then later on, we find out all these different interviews have been done. Then the FBI was brought in to look into the possible civil rights violations, any charges of racism, those kind of things. And then the special prosecutor came in. So there was a lot of canvassing to do because that particular night, they tried to do a canvass. Not that many witnesses came forward at that particular
Mo,
time.
let me get a quick take from you.
Ryan, I want to first say to the juror who said, would it have been different? And, you know, Charles said, well, you know, we can't really make an opinion on that. Absolutely, it would have been different. Absolutely, if it had been a black man, he would have been arrested on the grass. He wouldn't have even got to the station. He would have been charged that day, that night. It would have certainly been with murder, probably murder one. But let me just first say this about probable cause.
Wait, I just want to go to Ashley for one more question from the jury.
I got to talk about probable cause.
Go ahead, Ashley.
And, you know, that's why I said efficient, because if you've got all these things into play, that's why I think it was efficient for all of these different actors to be working on this prosecution and to get it done within a month. But we had a question from juror number 10.
Do you guys think, given the fact that George Zimmerman's father is a retired judge, that played a role in him not getting arrested that night?
You know what? Let me talk to Yale Galanter about that. Yale, the question was, do you think that the fact that George Zimmerman's father was a former magistrate, part of the legal community, did it have an effect on him not getting arrested? What do you think?
No, absolutely not. And there's something, the reason I used the word cautious was police departments here in the state of Florida are taught that in order to make an arrest on a homicide case, that a lawyer, an assistant state attorney, has to give their approval. And the reason for that is because once the arrest happens, there's a speedy trial clock that starts ticking. So within 185 days of an arrest, a defendant has to be brought to trial unless the defense asks for a continuance. So every police department, every law enforcement agency wants to get their ducks in a row. And clearly, there are differing point of views here. One is self-defense, and the other is whether or not the government has any evidence to show that it wasn't self-defense. So caution was the rule of the day here, because you don't want to arrest somebody too quickly until you have everything in all your ducks in a row.
All right, Yale, you know, that's just one of the big questions we have tonight, folks. There are a lot more coming up, including, was George Zimmerman pursuing Trayvon Martin? We'll talk about that.
So Ashley's walking down the street, and she gets grabbed by somebody, and he's got a gun in his gun belt, and she slams him, brings him to the ground, beats the living daylights out of him, and then he shoots her. Could he claim self-defense? I really doubt it.
Atlanta area and want to join us, email us at hlnjuror@turner.com, and you could be picked for After Dark jury duty only on HLN.
Hey, we've had some break-ins in my neighborhood, and there's a real suspicious guy. The best address I can give you. This guy looks like he's up to no good, or he's on drugs or something. It's raining, and he's just walking around looking about.
Okay, and this guy, is he white, black, or Hispanic?
He looks black.
Did you see what he was wearing?
Yeah, a dark hoodie, like a gray hoodie, and either jeans or sweatpants and white tennis shoes. He's here now. He was just staring.
Okay, it says on the left-hand side from the clubhouse?
No, you go in straight through the entrance, and then you make a left. You go straight in, don't turn and make a left. He's running.
He's running? Which way is he running?
Down towards the other entrance of the neighborhood.
Okay, which entrance is that he's heading towards?
The back entrance.
Are you following him?
Yeah.
Okay, we don't need you to do that.
We don't need you to do that. This could end up being a big part of this case. The bold question, was George Zimmerman pursuing Trayvon Martin? You better believe that's something that the jury is going to have to consider as they hear this case and when they go back to the jury room to decide it. So speaking of that, you heard him talking about the pursuit. Take a look at what he said to Fox News' Sean Hannity about this issue.
I meant that I was going in the same direction as him, to keep an eye on him so that I could tell the police where he was going. I didn't mean that I was actually pursuing him.
So this moment where some had suggested you were out of breath on that tape, you yourself were not running.
No, sir.
And you, I think, made a statement to the police that it was the wind as you were getting out of the car and moving, and that was the sound we hear, not you out of breath?
Yes, sir.
Hello? You going in the same direction? That's not following?
7-Eleven, when he's talking to him, it sounds like then he gets out of the car, and that's when he either starts walking very fast or starts running in the direction of Trayvon Martin. Now, the question is, when they said, you don't need to do that, did he turn back around and go back to his car?
He's going in the same direction. Hold on, I want to go to Zara Umansky. Hold on, I want to go to Zara Umansky. She knows George Zimmerman, used to represent him. Zara, he's going in the same direction, but he's not following. What do you make of that?
That's not what he said.
He's doing the smart thing. Any concerned citizen would do that in their neighborhood. You see someone suspicious, you're going to watch them, see where they're going and what they're up to. He's on the phone with 911. 911 wants you to watch the person. I don't think he did anything wrong.
No. 911 did not ask him to watch anybody.
First of all, it was not he didn't call 911. It was a non-emergency.
Let's let Charles jump in. Charles, go ahead.
Yeah, no one
Charles,
told him to follow.
If you listen to what he said specifically to Sean Hannity, he was completely genuine about it. He said, I'm going in his direction. I'm keeping an eye on him. He's not saying I stopped following him.
That's not so then he's following
I mean, you can interpret that as meaning I'm keeping a distance, but he's not saying I stopped following him.
Charles, let me ask you this. Charles, let me ask you this, though. On a rainy night, because I'm just trying to parse through all this.
This is outrageous.
It's a rainy night. He's going after him. He's checking him out, I guess. What is he doing? And why not stand down when the cops ask?
This guy is, as a cop wannabe, he's got some kind of, hero envy. And he's the night watchman. He's a self-appointed night watchman. So this is what he has, deemed himself to do, is to be the guy who's going to solve the crime problem in the neighborhood.
Okay.
That's his issue here.
Okay, hold on, Mo. I want to get to Ashley because she's going to talk to the jury. Ashley, this following issue, you could tell how tough an issue this is going to be for the court.
Oh, this is going to be the prime issue in this case. And ladies and gentlemen, you've heard our panel debating this. Let me ask you, do you think that George Zimmerman was wrong in pursuing Trayvon? All right, Ryan, it's split.
Okay. Looks like Karen there, juror number 3 is a little bit in the middle, but it's 10-2. It's a tight one. Go ahead, Mo, real quick.
To say that there was anything but following is absolutely ridiculous in this case. When prior to him saying that they said don't follow anymore, he already decided that Trayvon was up to no good, that he was on drugs, and that he was there for a bad reason. But then followed up to say, yeah, he's just walking around the subdivision. Well, which was it? He was following Trayvon so that he could do something to that poor child. And there is no question that that is what happened.
Okay, we got a lot more to talk about with that. We got a lot more to talk about. We got more coming up after the break.
This case isn't going to be decided on the parsing of words. When I'm driving on the highway, I'm going in the same direction of all the cars too, but I'm not following them. It's going to be decided on the fact that there's a young man dead and whether or not he should be dead.
What did you do from that moment forward? Because this is where we get into this minute gap in this case. And what did you do from that minute forward when the dispatch said, we don't need you to follow him? What did you do next?
I walked across the sidewalk onto my street, Retreat View Circle, where I thought I would meet a police officer that I had called.
So you did not continue to follow him at that point?
No, sir.
All right, could be an important distinction there, folks. Following him, pursuing him, but did he instigate what happened? What will the jury read into that pursuit? I got to look at this and wonder about the pursuit factor. And Charles, you were bringing this up. So let's say he is following, let's say he is pursuing. Could that also mean instigation, that he's picking the fight with Trayvon Martin by following?
Well, I mean, at this point, the only thing we have to rely on is what what Zimmerman's saying. But we also know from, witness number 8, which is Trayvon's girlfriend, that he's aware that he is being followed, right? He knows. In fact, she says she hears like some interaction going on between the two of them. Like, what are you doing here? Or something to that effect. And so, who knows? I mean, maybe at some point, Trayvon thought that he was about to be robbed, and maybe he circled back and reinitiated the contact that Zimmerman unquestionably started.
A lot of possibilities here.
There's a lot of
possibilities.
But Ryan,
But you know what? Wait, hold on, Mo, because I want to show our audience this animation that we've got. This is essentially what happened if you take it from George Zimmerman's part of the story. So we're going through this. This is the actual complex. You see that Zimmerman spots Trayvon Martin. He drives to the clubhouse. He makes that call to police. Then he says he loses sight of him. So look at this path as he goes down. Right? He's driving into the complex, going right into this area. You see the blue line representing Trayvon Martin. Then he says that he parks his car after losing him. Then he sees him. Martin emerges, circles the car. This according to George Zimmerman. So you see that path right there. Then Martin goes down that road. George Zimmerman, as he said, you just saw it in the Hannity interview, gets out of the car, right? He's trying to look for the name for police. He's walking back to his car, and that's when he says that Martin interrupts him. And basically, the confrontation happens at that point. Now, you know what? There's a couple things that strike me as interesting about this. And Yale Galanter, I want to go to you on this one. He says he's the captain of the neighborhood watch, right? He knows this area, presumably. Why would he need to get out of the car to look for a street name if he knows if he's the neighborhood watch guy?
That's a really good point, Ryan. You know, you've got to look at it in the context and the viewpoint from Zimmerman. He's obviously very frustrated. Calls the police all the time. I think it was like 40 or 50 times. The police are slow to respond. He thinks something's going on. So, you know, that's one of the weakest links in this case is why did he get out of the car? Why did he become the pursuer? Why didn't he know the neighborhood? And, you know, the prosecutor's going to take all of his statements afterwards and try and use them against him.
Yeah, I think that's going to be key. And Zara Umansky, I have to say, that's a really big problem for him. How do you explain that if you're George Zimmerman?
Well, George is a concerned citizen. Most of us would love to have someone like George live in our neighborhood and watch out for us. And he's just trying to get, I think, a closer viewpoint, so he gets out of his car. I don't think that means he's trying to do something that's bad. I think he's just trying to be more helpful to get a better look and see what Trayvon was up to.
Ryan, I would not like to have George Zimmerman as my neighborhood watchman.
He's not the guy for you?
For the record. And I also want to just say this one thing. Okay, go ahead.
Wait, hold on, because I got to get to Ashley, because Ashley's got the jury over there is chomping at the bit. They want to address this.
Juror number 8 is a former Atlanta police officer, 25 years, and she has got a lot to say. So juror number 8, what do you think about this?
Well, I think based on, if I heard you correctly, Mo, you said that George was pursuing him to do something to him. Mm-hmm. Well, that sounds like it would be something premeditated, like he had an agenda. I think he was following him, but I don't think he was pursuing him to actually do something to him.
So why do you think he was following him then? What would your take be on it, given your history as a police officer?
My take is that he was a cop wannabe and he was a little too overzealous. He should have done just what law enforcement told him to do, or the operator had told him to do. Back off, just keep an eye on him. It's not his job to pursue him.
Okay.
And you know, that night he wasn't out in his capacity officially as a neighborhood watch guy. He was on the way to the store and then saw this suspicious person. So, you know, and I've said it all along, is if you're out there as a citizen, out there as neighborhood watch, you should not be armed. And, you know, unless you are a law enforcement officer or a retired law enforcement officer, you have every right in the state of Georgia and Florida and other states to have a concealed weapons permit. But in your capacity as a neighborhood watch person, you should not be
You're
armed.
not a cop. You can pick up the phone, Ashley, right, Ashley?
I am having to keep number 2 in his seat. He is dying to say something here.
I'm just trying to find out, the stand your ground, how does this go and play with the pursuit and obviously there's the eventual shooting of Trayvon Martin?
Stand your ground. How does that factor into all this? You know what? Let's hold that question. We're going to talk about that. Don't worry, juror number 2. We got you. We'll be right back with more.
Okay, so last night I had PTSD watching Game of Thrones. All the good people got killed. I didn't have it watching Django Unchained. So watch for both sides to vilify both parties here. They're going to want you to believe one way or the other.
I passed him, and he kept staring at me. I actually walked all the way to the street. Right back there, they said, "Are you following him?" And I said, "Yes," because I was, you know, in the area. And they said, "We don't need you to do that."
That's George Zimmerman walking police through what happened the day after. Now, let's reveal what's inside my mystery box, and it is witness number 8, Trayvon Martin's girlfriend, who was on the phone with Trayvon that night, the state's star witness. And she's a real mystery. Her name is not public, and little is known about her relationship with Martin. But Zimmerman's defense team recently released witness number 8's handwritten one-page letter. Notice that it's dated March 19th, 22 days after the killing. And in the letter she writes, quote, "I was on the phone when Trayvon decided to go to the corner store. It started to rain." She talks about a man following Martin. Then Trayvon turned around and said, "Why are you following me?" Then I heard him fall. Then the phone hung up. I called back and texted, no response. In my mind, I thought it was just a fight. Then I found out this tragic story. Thank you. Her name is blacked out because she's a minor, only 16 at the time. But here's what she told prosecutors.
And then he told me this guy was getting close. And he told me the guy was getting real close to him. Next thing I hear, "Why you following me for?"
And what do you hear Trayvon saying?
"Why you following me for?"
Why are you following me for?
Yeah.
And then what happened?
I hear this man, like an old man, say, "What are you doing around here?" And I hear his son like bump. You can hear that somebody bumped Trayvon. So I can hear the grass. And then I was still screaming. I was saying, "Trayvon, Trayvon."
And there was no response?
Yeah. And then next thing the phone just shut off.
And now Martin's family attorney, Benjamin Crump, is catching heat over how he interviewed witness number 8. You see, late today, a win for the Zimmerman defense team. A Florida appeals court says Zimmerman's attorneys can depose Crump and question him about Trayvon's girlfriend. Ashley?
Wow. Juror number 4 had some comments from the previous segment. What was that, juror number 4?
I just wanted to know if George Zimmerman had any previous problems with racism or any issues with that.
Interesting question. Mike Brooks saying no.
Not that we know of. We don't know the whole background, dealing with George Zimmerman. But, the FBI's investigated that part of it, and they don't feel that that was racially motivated.
Okay, Mo.
Well, I don't think that you have to have hard evidence that something is racist to call somebody's actions racist in their manner. And I think by some of the assertions that he made when he said that Trayvon was there for trouble, that he looked like he was on drugs, he seemed threatening, I think that those are all things that would have you believe that a person is profiling somebody and making a judgment about a child based on racial stereotypes, no doubt.
Zara Umansky, you used to represent George Zimmerman. What's he like?
He's a normal, average guy. I never saw him or viewed him as a racist. And going back to what I just heard, I mean, we're talking about a child, but he was 17 years old. He was practically a man, Trayvon. And remember, don't forget the toxicology report. He may have been under the influence of some drugs. I mean, George may have not been mistaken by what he believed.
Ashley.
We've got a comment from juror number 11 who happens to work in a law office.
Going back to what Zara just said, whether or not he was under the influence of anything, it doesn't matter. He was walking around the neighborhood, and just like me, if I decide that I want to walk around the neighborhood, I don't have to have anybody's permission to do so, but that doesn't give you the right to follow me or shoot me either.
Absolutely.
I mean, doubling back for 1 second, because Mo and I kind of debated this whole issue of, whether he was a racist or not, or is a racist. And the fact of the matter is, in today's society, with the blogosphere and the internet, I mean, listen, this guy has been under the microscope. If he was a racist, trust me, there would have been someone from high school that would have come out at some point and said, listen, this guy used to use, racial slurs all the time, or, I mean, his mother's Hispanic. There's just no evidence of that at this point.
His mother's Hispanic. That is a reason to say that somebody is not racist.
If he was profiling, I would say it has more to do with perhaps Trayvon's youth than anything, because it's generally juveniles that are
and the crime they had in the neighborhood to begin with.
It had to do with the fact that he was a young black man wearing a hood, walking around, and this wannabe cop who was taking it.
There hasn't been any evidence
that
of
would be
that.
a very different situation if you were walking around with a hood.
Let's look at the facts
about what it is that we are dealing with here. And it is very true that he made, he said expletives when he called. He said that he thought this kid was on drugs. He knew nothing, and he was far away. Trayvon was far away when George Zimmerman was making these assertions, all based on what he thought a young 17-year-old black kid looks like, acts like, believes in, does, is on drugs in a neighborhood.
His possible drug usage, state of mind, all factor into the hostility that might have occurred when these two came face to face.
hostility to the table. George Zimmerman brought the hostility to the table. Trayvon was going to the store.
All of this is going to come out in court, and you can see how difficult this is going to be. A lot of issues on each side. We're going to be back with more. Keep it right here. Another bold question coming up.
So Trayvon may have smoked marijuana. I think you have to put everybody in Colorado in jail or shoot him if that's the case. 90% of teenagers smoke marijuana. That's not a reason to be shot.
That's right, there is a gunshot. Hurry up. Stand by with me and just update me. Did you see anything at all, or you just heard screaming? I was heard screaming and then a gunshot. And someone's yelling 2 doors down from me, screaming, hollering, help, help, help. It sounds like a male. And you don't know why? I don't know why. I think they're yelling help, but I don't know. So you think he's yelling help? Yes. All right, what is your... Oh, God. I mean, they're looking at the person that's dead.
Just shocking to hear. And who was yelling on that call? Who was it? George Zimmerman or Trayvon Martin? That's our third bold question of the evening. Who was yelling? Because that is another thing, guys, that could end up being huge in this case. Sure. Who was the aggressor? Who was taking on whom, Mike?
You know, me personally, I think it might have been Zimmerman. But you know what? All these tests and all these, all these analysis of the voices there, you can't say for sure. There's no true science to say who that voice was.
It's a good point. Yale Galanter, these voice experts are going to come into court. They're going to talk about who it was. But as Mike says, you know, how effective is that kind of testimony? How accurate can that really be?
Well, here it's going to be an issue of fact for the jury. I mean, if the judge allows the science in, and she may or she may not, because it really is iffy on whether or not the science can even identify this voice, ultimately the jurors are going to have to go back into that jury room and decide which, if any, of the experts they believe, or listen to the tapes themselves and make their own determination.
Ashley, that's going to be a tough determination to make.
You know, I wish that there was a crystal ball and you actually could determine who made those statements and who was screaming for help. Jury, what do you think? Was it George Zimmerman that was screaming for help? So we've got number 7 on the back. I want to go talk to number 7. Yes. So, tell me.
I just think it was him.
Okay.
I think it was him because I think he was overpowered, and I believe that's why he was screaming.
Okay, thank you. And juror number 1 was kind of on the fence? You're not sure?
I'm really not sure. I mean, you can't really tell from the voice. It would seem as though if it was somebody screaming, it would be George until the shot goes off. And
well, let me ask you this. What would convince you? What type of evidence would you want to see from the state or the defense to convince you?
I'd like to see George say it for himself. If he said it for himself, I could look in his face and I could tell whether he was lying or not.
Okay. And number 5, you've been awfully quiet, but I heard you saying in a break that you've got 3 boys. What do you think about Trayvon's mother's comment about that she knew that was her son's voice?
But you know when they're in trouble. You know when something's wrong, and you know when they're screaming. You know.
All right. Thank you.
That's a critical point. You know when a family member's screaming. Mo,
Oh, listen.
what do you think?
It was Trayvon screaming. First of all, if you have 2 people, one armed and one unarmed, who do you think is going to be the person most likely to yell out for help? Is it going to be the person who can reach in and take out their gun? Or is it going to be the person that can't do anything because they're being constantly attacked? It was Trayvon screaming for his life. And then you hear the bullet, which is always so hard to hear. To me, it's clear it was Trayvon. Why would the assumption, to me, we constantly give the benefit of the doubt to George Zimmerman. This whole case says, George, what did you think? George, how'd it go? George,
you and I talked about this. There's one thing that and this is what I would ask the jury to consider, and that is that that evening when George Zimmerman was taken into custody, as part of his statement, he says, as part of his interview, that he yelled for help before he fired the shot. Okay? And that's a bold assertion to make.
Right,
because
you know why? Because George Zimmerman knows what he needed to say.
But how is he going to know that you're not going to be able to distinguish the difference between his voice and Trayvon's voice?
A lot of bold assertions here. And you know what? We got a lot more. We're not leaving this subject, folks. We'll be right back with more After Dark.
Okay, the most famous case where a voice mattered. Charles Lindbergh accused Bruno Hauptmann. Hey, doctor, over here, over here. Lindbergh said it was Hauptmann's voice, the kidnapper of his son. So sometimes you don't need the experts. You just need the human to be on the stand and identify the person's voice.
He got on top of me. He got on top of me somewhere around here. And that's when I started screaming for help. I started screaming help as loud as I could.
It sounds like a male. And you don't know why? I don't know why. I think they're yelling help, but I don't know. So you think he's yelling help? Yes. All right, what is your...
Kind of breaks your heart when you hear that scream, gives some people chills. But the question is, who was screaming, George Zimmerman or Trayvon Martin? Ashley Merchant is with our jury.
So I'm going to ask you a similar question. How many of you believe that Trayvon Martin was screaming for help on that tape? All right, juror number 3. No. Do tell. I'm very interested. I'm a little surprised, I must say.
I think it has to do with the fact that somebody was getting their nose bashed in and then their head bashed in, and that would make me yell for help.
Do you think it could have been both people yelling for help, or do you think it was just one?
I don't know, because at that point in time, when George Zimmerman was on the ground getting his head bashed, he was not the one on top.
Right, right. And I've been torn with that. If it could have been both people screaming.
Yeah.
Number 4? No?
No, from what he just said about, because George Zimmerman made the statement that he said, help,
Right.
help, help. And I don't think he's that bright to really plan that far ahead.
Okay, all right. All right, and juror number 12. What do you think?
Well, I have a totally different take. I know they've tried to get it from the scientific voice analysis, which it seems that it's so close that those people can't even tell. So I have to revert back to Trayvon's mother, who I've seen in agony in these interviews, have no reason to doubt her sincerity. And she's saying that's her son screaming. And it's hard for me to disbelieve that a mother of a child that's 17 is not going to know that that's her son's voice.
Definitely an emotional call, Ryan.
Absolutely is.
Phone
Zara,
call's
you know,
very
it absolutely is. It's one of the toughest calls in this trial coming up. Zara Umansky used to represent George Zimmerman. Zara, you know George's voice. You probably talked to him a million times. What does that sound like to you on the tape?
Ryan, it sounds like George, and let me tell you why. Forget the science. Let's just use common sense. George is the one with the injuries. He's the one who's yelling help. He's the one, like juror number 3 said, who's injured. If it was Trayvon and George had the gun out, wouldn't you be yelling, don't shoot me? You wouldn't be yelling help. You probably would be yelling, don't shoot me. He's got a gun. So it doesn't make any sense. Common sense tells us it's got to be George.
All right, common sense.
That is absolutely, to me, an unbelievable assertion to say that common sense would have a 17-year-old saying, oh, he has a gun, instead of help. He was crying out for somebody to come out there and help him. So just the way juror number 3 said, just like juror number 3 said that George Zimmerman would have cried out because he was getting hurt, so would a 17-year-old who thought they were about to die, about to lose their life. I don't understand how that can't be common sense, that it would be Trayvon screaming for somebody to get this crazy lunatic watchdog off of him.
But no, he was on George, if you recall. So you got to get your facts straight, Mo. Let's rely on the facts. Let's not keep emotion.
This was a fight. This was a fight. Yes,
there
was time, and there was times when Trayvon was on top of George Zimmerman, and George Zimmerman was tussling with Trayvon.
All right,
as well.
were we there? No. All right. One thing I don't want to get lost in this passion, for, you know, is that this is a tragedy, and that a young man.
It absolutely is.
But the fact of the matter is,
and you know what?
George Zimmerman was he was on the losing end of a physical confrontation.
All right, you know what? We got more bold questions. We'll have more every night until the beginning of the trial. Florida versus Zimmerman right here on After Dark.